always weird when you watch those games back because now, I mean, especially in recent years, we've seen that three-point shooting has become the way you win games, especially on the, if you're an offensive-driven team. If you don't have guys that can knock down three-pointers, I mean, just look at this past year for us. We struggled shooting the ball from the outside. One of the biggest reasons why we were as bad as we were offensively. So, yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting. And I know one of the things that also caught your eye was just, the difference in defense from, the way that Roy Williams plays to the way that Dean Smith plays.
Yeah, I've got two things that I want to touch on, and we'll start with the defense. Look, this podcast is named after Roy Williams. You follow me on any Twitter, social media, Facebook account. I love the man. I revere the man. If there are a couple things that I wish he would do differently, it was that I wish he would be more willing to change defenses from throughout the game, not necessarily possession by possession like Dean Smith, used to. But one thing that came out of that game, Carolina trapped Ward Go. I mean, right now, if Roy Williams traps, it's usually out of a timeout or when we're trying to get back in the game. You made the point. They trapped the first possession after the opening tip, and it was just a theme that we saw the whole entire game, and it's why Carolina was always so much better defensively under Dean Smith than they have been under Roy Williams because they were able to affect the tempo and the rhythm of the game on the defensive end, and that's just something that maybe it's personnel, maybe it's the way that the game has moved to with the three-point line, positionless basketball, and floor spacing and whatnot. I'd like to see Roy Williams throw in a press, throw in a zone look, not for, a 4-minute stretch, but just a possession or two, just to kind of give the opposition something else to think about. And so that was something that was very noticeable. And then I put a tweet out that, I thought I would get roasted for more than I actually did. And maybe because it was a holiday, people weren't really on their phones. I put it out during in the final 4 minutes when Carolina was in their semi-four corners because I thought they took some shots that they didn't have to take, and it effectively almost cost them the game. If there's one big difference between Roy Williams and Dean Smith, it's that at 4 minutes left in the game, Dean Smith is, with a 4-point lead in theory. He's willing to hold the ball and just work the clock. Roy Williams, if he's up 4 minutes to go, now wants to beat you by 16 because he don't want to put take the foot off the gas. He wants to stay aggressive, and he wants to finish you off. And I got some people that just said, sometimes that kind of theory has come back to bite Carolina in the butt. You look at games that we've blown, the Duke game in 2012 when Austin Rivers hit the buzzer beater, and so many different games that, maybe if we would get more conservative in the final 4 minutes, we would have won. But I think that goes away from who Roy Williams is, the competitor that burns deep inside of him and how bad he wants to not really beat you. He'll never publicly say it. He wants to embarrass people. And I think that's one difference that you could really look at between Dean Smith and Roy Williams as head coaches.
Yeah, I mean, I think to a certain extent you're right about that. I think both guys kind of had the same mindset with the MJ dunk late in the game that they do not like the fact that you're basically rubbing it into them at the end. But, I mean, it's shocking to see a lot of the stuff that Dean does. And there are so many things that you look at and say, yeah, that's exactly right, Roy. But, I mean, from what we have heard, basically they were like carbon copies of each other. And from the 2 games that I've seen, it was completely different. And I understand that it was definitely a much different time. The guys back then couldn't shoot as well, so trapping definitely worked a lot better. But, I mean, still, it was just a completely different game. But it's amazing to see how good both coaches are at coaching their teams up to win these types of big games. I mean, I've been thoroughly impressed with everything that I've seen, of course, from Dean Smith, and, it's something that I expected to see on there. And then the other thing, I am never going to get used to Roy Williams as a young guy on the bench. That does not look right. I am so used to gray, white-haired Roy Williams that seeing him with dark, jet black hair just throws me off every time. But one thing that I noticed in this game, more than in the national championship game, Roy was the guy that every time they would look at the bench and Dean was talking to somebody, he was talking to Roy. Roy was not one of those guys that was going to sit back and be the quiet assistant that was just there to coach when, he was told to coach. Roy was a guy that was always trying to learn more, was always trying to tell Dean Smith what he was thinking, what was going on. And you could see from really when he was an assistant coach that he had what it took to be a head coach.
Yeah, you got to commend Dean Smith for giving a guy that at that point had been on his bench for about 5 years that kind of trust and, was willing to listen to him. This is a guy that when he first came back was a part-time assistant head coach. That's all he was. At this point now he's moved into a more full-time role, but didn't think any less of him, was willing to hear what he had to say and sometimes would even use some of his suggestions. And it's why you see the same thing with Roy Williams, especially now, as you've got Hubert Davis on the bench. Now Sean May's on the bench, Brad Frederick. At some point, Kendall Marshall will have a spot on the bench. They're going to have an input. They're not just going to be told to sit there and, log statistics or, look at analytics or whatnot. They're allowed to have a voice and an opinion, and it's what makes, the Carolina basketball coaching tree as good as it is. So anything else from you, observation rounds from 84 Maryland?
No, just a good overall game. And, of course, this weekend we got a ton more that are going to play to kind of commemorate the last Sunday of the Last Dance. So there's going to be some more great opportunities to check out a lot of those games. I don't know if I'm going to be able to catch every game because it's 10 hours worth of basketball. I might have something that I've got to go out and do. Never really know. But the plan is to be in front of the television and watching Carolina basketball all day, something that'll be pretty fun because with those games, it just feels kind of different. I mean, some of the games that I've seen before, it's just not as exciting watching them back because you know what the result's going to be in the end. You don't really get mad at the foul calls and stuff like that. But the games that happened back in the 80s, I mean, you figure since they're showing them with Michael Jordan on the scene, they're going to win. But it just gives you a different feel because it's something you haven't seen so far. So I'm pretty excited for those games as well. And then, of course, the last two episodes of The Last Dance, which I know we're going to talk about here next.
Yeah, and the only final thing I got to say from 84 Maryland, I know Maryland's no longer in the ACC anymore. Cole Fieldhouse was a great place for a college basketball venue, especially when Maryland was, like they were in 84, national title good. So, all right. Let's get to The Last Dance. Episodes 7 and 8 aired on Sunday night. And when we spoke about The Last Dance the last time, we spoke about how 5 and 6, albeit were still very good episodes, were probably on the bottom tier of the 3 weekends that we'd had so far. 7 and 8 made up for anything that maybe under-delivered the week before. In my opinion, the 2 best episodes we've had to date. You've got to see so much about Michael Jordan that even us as sports nerds and junkies didn't even know about. Accusations about, when he retired from the NBA. Was it a suspension from David Stern that was just trying to be held secret? To the accusations of him being somewhat involved or to be blamed for the murder of his father. We got to, hear legendary stories about the fight with Steve Kerr. You get, for me, my most powerful moment of Michael Jordan. That's him laying on the locker room floor after they won the 96 finals on Father's Day. And we've always seen the picture. Well, now we got to hear the picture. And it wasn't sobbing. It was loud heaving that he missed his dad that much that he wasn't there to witness him accomplish this great feat. And it was phenomenal. It was another Sunday that just continues to prove why this is by far the best documentary ESPN has ever put together.
Yeah, I think I don't know if we would consider them the best. I have no idea because there's just so many great episodes. I mean, there really haven't been any bad episodes so far. But it was definitely the most real episodes. A real look at Michael Jordan as opposed to, you got to see him as a guy that went from being on top of the world to seeing his world crash down before him in front of his eyes and the type of impact that had. You know, we knew that he was very close with his father, but I don't think that everybody knew just how close he was. Pretty much part of the reason why he went and played baseball was because he made a promise to his dad that was what, you know, he was going to do that at some point. You know, he had told him that when he was younger. So, and right before they had passed away, they had started talking about that. So I think that, you know, that was something that, you know, kind of changed the perspective for people on, you know, when Mike went and played baseball, because I still feel like a lot of people thought, well, that was just him trying to show that he was a superior athlete. And it really wasn't. It was something that, you know, he did because he had told his dad that was what he planned on doing. And his dad ultimately, you know, when he was younger, wanted him to play professional baseball. So, you know, that was definitely interesting. It's hard to watch, you know, that at the end of the 96 championship, to watch that on Father's Day and see him in the locker room just uncontrollable, not even really, I mean, not worried about winning a championship. I mean, just moments removed from one of the better moments of his life, probably, honestly, because you got to think of everything that he had been through, you know, leaving in 93, coming back in 95, and not really being the same guy that season, getting beat by a former teammate in Horace Grant, who, you know, then they go on to, you know, compete in the NBA Finals. It probably felt like if he had come back earlier, or if he had been putting in, you know, different type of work when he was, you know, with the baseball team and had started thinking about coming back to basketball, they would have had a chance. So, you know, that was definitely, you know, telling about how close he was with his dad. And I think that's something we're going to see probably throughout the rest of the episode still. The final two, I think we'll still hear a lot about just how impactful his father was on him. And, you know, yeah, I think the other stuff that we saw in the episode was really phenomenal. I mean, we got to see a lot more cursing from Michael Jordan. That was probably the ones that they were talking about the most when they were saying we're going to have to put out an explicit version, because that entire episode probably would have made no sense, because just about every word towards the middle of the seventh and early in the eighth episode, about every sentence had a curse word in it, which was, you know, pretty phenomenal, I got to admit. It was hilarious because Mike just works it into his lingo so well. And, you know, I think the other thing that I just took away, you know, just seeing how motivated he was by the fact that they lost to Orlando in that 95 season, a year where he knew he wasn't conditioned to play basketball at the level that he had before. But to see him get so angry after that game that he goes into the locker room, calls his personal trainer and tells him, you know, that usually he takes time off, and he tells him, I'll see you tomorrow. And from that moment on, even when he was filming the Space Jam movie, they built him a court, they built him weight equipment or they brought in weight equipment and built him an area where he could work out. Because he told them, I have to be able to work on my game because I've got to be better. And to see, you know, him work that hard as a man that had already won 3 championships, had already accomplished a ton, was a Hall of Famer, was definitely a guy that most people thought of as the best player in the game no matter what. He probably could have never come back to basketball and would still be in the conversation as the greatest player of all time. To see him that angry at the fact that he got beat in that 95 season was just amazing, and just continues to show that there's guys that are competitive, but there's nobody that's Michael Jordan.
The motivation factor is, I think, what puts him in the tier all by himself. The ability to self-motivate to a level that I have a hard time motivating myself to get up and go to the bathroom at 1 a.m. in the morning because I don't want to get up out of my bed. This man made up a lie about a guy taking a jab at him just to go out and embarrass him the next night. Goes to dinner with Ahmad Rashad. the night before Game 1 of the finals in '96 against the Sonics. Sees then Sonics head coach George Karl, former Carolina guy, at the same restaurant. And he doesn't even bother to say hey to Michael. And Michael just says, okay, well, now I'm going to go kick your ass. And that's what puts him in the different level, is that he found ways to motivate